So here we go. Okay, so I'm going to officially welcome everyone to our fifth webinar for this year. We're going to focus on the February topic, which is equanimity. We're going to go through the Mixtape booklet because the other two are actually available on our website, but not everyone in this webinar is teaching Mixtape, and the topics we focus on here are relevant to both the Musar curriculum. The topic this month is also equanimity, and the standard curriculum, the topic is mindfulness and conscious living, and I'm sure you'll see the relationship between the two. So I'm going to start off with the agenda, and I'm going to start off the way I start just about every webinar, and that is to remind you to share interesting things your students are doing in our closed Facebook group. Recently, Ellen Goldberg-Tishman from Temple Emmanuel in Sarasota posted something really nice about her students. They made a Tu B'Shvat rap, and they wrote it and they performed it, and that's a bit of the Mixtape curriculum in motion. They were working in Charuta, which was the topic that they were studying, so it's a nice way to apply it. And you're invited to also, if you do something interesting, besides putting it on our Facebook page, you can post it on our Instagram page with a hashtag Chai Mitzvah Mitzvah. And if you don't do Instagram, you can send it to me and I'll post it. It's always interesting for people to see what other people are doing. Okay, so let's go to our themes. Equanimity is about balance in your temperament so you can feel life's pleasures and pains without being pushed off track. Sometimes we're so proud that we become boastful, or we say and do things out of anger that we regret later. So equanimity reminds us, it helps us how to navigate life. Matt Barr uses a Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote to illustrate this point. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, "Getting mad won't help persuade." So our themes are basically equanimity is about balancing your emotions, and it's necessary in order to navigate life successfully. And so that's a really good topic for our teens because, they're getting to a point where they've got some stresses they've got to navigate, and it's helpful if they can find something within our tradition to help them navigate. I am going to welcome Marlena. I'm excited that you are here. There we go. And so please, if you have anything to say, unmute yourself whenever you want to jump in. And I'm excited that you joined us, so welcome. We are just about to go through each Mixtape lesson has definitions from all sorts of sources. That's usually the beginning of it. And we're going to look at the definitions now. And they are focusing on equanimity in the lens of peace. So as we look at the definitions, let's think about which makes sense in terms of peace, and which for world peace, for inner peace, or for both. And wait, I have one more person to welcome. Oh, no, I don't. You're calling listeners, so. Okay, great. Anyway, I'm very glad that you're here. Let's start looking at these and think about world peace, inner peace, and both world and inner peace, and where they overlap and where they're different. So peace is not an is, but a becoming. It is a day-to-day problem, the continuing project of a multitude of events and judgments. That's from Haile Selassie. Peace is a daily, a weekly, a monthly process, gradually changing opinions, slowly eroding old barriers, quietly building new structures, and that's from John F. Kennedy. Peace is such that if we are incapable of finding it in ourselves, it is pointless to search elsewhere. That's from Francois de la Rochefoucauld. I don't even know how you say his name, but I think it's a really good quote because it's talking about both in ourselves and in the world. And if we can't find it in ourselves, how are we going to promote it in other places? Peace cannot be found by avoiding life. That's from Virginia Woolf. Peace is not just an end to hostilities, but the permanent removal of the underlying causes and reasons that are the source of hostility. That's from Immanuel Kant. And as you can see, these are approaching from all different angles the idea of peace. I'm going to go to the next one. Peace is recognizing and accepting the fact that life is conflict, and man, being part of life, is himself an expression of conflict. That's from Henry Miller. I did not know that Henry Miller had these kinds of thoughts. There's another Henry Miller quote at the end, which I found interesting as well. Peace is not made at the council table or by treaties, but in the hearts of man. That's from Herbert Hoover. Peace is not something made with friends. It is made with enemies. That's from Yitzhak Rabin. I think that's maybe my favorite. And peace is not God's gift to his creatures. Peace is our gift to each other. That's from Elie Wiesel. And the last one, another Henry Miller. If it is indeed possible, then it will come through being, not through having. That's also Henry Miller. So what I'm going to throw out to you is, do you agree or disagree with any of these definitions? And how do you see them in terms of world peace, inner peace, and where the two overlap? Marlena, do you have something to say? No. Okay, so what I'm seeing from these, and what I'm wondering what your students are going to find, but I think that we're talking about equanimity. So let's focus back to that, which is kind of finding a balance, like a surfer. That's why I had that surfer image. Not letting things knock you off your balance. And that in itself is a kind of inner peace. And one thing I find from this is, especially in our current times, I think we find ourselves losing our inner balance because the world around us is in so much unbalance. So one of the things I think is to help us find our balance between outer and inner peace. And the other is, if you can be strong within yourself, then you might be able to influence what goes on in the world in a positive way. That's my take on it. If anyone else wants to jump in, please do. Okay, I'm going to go to the next one then. The next thing we have is the Bible Raps report. I'm not going to play it for you here, although I do hope you play it for your classes. Basically, he talks about equanimity and some characters from Genesis, Cain and Abel and Noah. And he also alludes to the lack of equanimity in families. He actually does it in a pretty funny way. He's like, Mom, I'm doing the report. So it's kind of cute. And we're going to explore texts after this about Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel and Noah later. But first, I want to focus on preserving equanimity with family members. I think that's pretty relevant to the teens that are going to be doing this. And so some questions that might arise from this. Are there members of your family who seem to upset you easily? They know how to push your buttons. Do you think family members react differently to you? And do you react differently to your family members than to other people? And if so, why might this happen? So I think that most kids will find, and I think most people find, that their family members know them so well and they have history with them, so they tend to react to things a little bit differently. I don't think they take each other at face value as much. And I think it could be an interesting discussion for teens. And again, if anyone wants to jump in, I would love you to do that. Okay, and now we can go on and we can begin looking at our Torah sources. So the background of this, the word equa, part of the word equanimity, reminds us that our moments of joy are balanced with proportional pain. Liz, you think you are muted. Hold on, before I go back to this, I'm gonna see what I can do with Liz. I don't know. Are you on the phone? Yes. So when you were on the phone yesterday, I could hear you. I don't think you're muted. Do you have something you'd like to add to the discussion? I'll just read it to everyone because I can see it. She's going to call in again. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead a little bit while we do this. So we're talking about equanimity. So we're talking about balancing both pain and joy. And I think we can appreciate, we've always been told, and I think it's true, you really appreciate your joy when you've also experienced the opposite of it. And so when we talk about the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve had only bliss, the pain of childbirth, and the broken glass that we do at a wedding to remember sadness in our time of joy. Both of those things have to do with equanimity. It's a reminder of our mortality at the moment that we bring new life into the world. So with that in mind, let's look at this text from Genesis. And to the woman he said, I will make most severe your pangs in childbirth. In pain shall you bear children. Yet your urge shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. To Adam he said, because you did as your wife said and ate of the tree about which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed be the ground because of you. By toil shall you eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall it sprout for you. But your food shall be the grasses of the field. By the sweat of your brow shall you get bread to eat until you return to the ground, for from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. The man named his wife Eve because she was the mother of all the living. And the Lord made garments of skins for Adam and his wife and clothed them. And the Lord God said, now that the man has become like one of us, knowing good and bad, what if he should stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever? So the Lord God banished him from the Garden of Eden to till the soil from which he was taken. He drove the man out and stationed east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim of the fiery, ever-turning sword to guard the way to the tree of life. So I think there are a lot of interpretations that can be seen here. And maybe we'll try to focus on how this, and the equanimity part of this, because there are so many different things we could think about. So knowing that both joy and pain are essential parts of life, why is equanimity such an important trait? We can think of what's going on here. Now, we're going forward in our lives, but it's not all easy like it was for Adam and Eve. Now we've got pain in childbirth. It's not easy to grow our food. So why would equanimity be important in the lens of this and in our own lives? So I think the point that we're making here, which is especially good for our students, is that there's going to be stuff every day that stresses you out. And if you can try and take a step back and have some perspective and have some equanimity, you're going to be able to navigate through these things and you're going to be able to succeed. But if you get thrown by one thing or another, it's going to be really hard to go on with your life. That's one of the things. And then this is a question I really want you guys to answer, because when I saw this, when Matt thought of this question, I just thought it was amazing. And the question is it easier to be happy or sad? Someone has to answer that question. Okay, I'm going to ask Marlena. Do you think it's easier to be happy or sad? If I unmute you, will you answer the question?
Yeah, I have to be, wait a minute. Okay. I think that we certainly enjoy wallowing in the misery more than wallowing in the happiness. That's sort of fearsome for us. I don't know. Maybe I'm just speaking about myself. But I think I've spent a lot more time being sad than being happy. So
that's an interesting answer. And see, I love that, because when we think about taking this to our students, if someone gave an answer like that, wouldn't everyone else feel so much more open to talk about themselves? And I think that's part of what we want to do. We want to form a group of people who are not afraid to talk and who can share and know it's like a safe place to share. And that's a great answer. And I was trying to think of what my answer would be, whether it's easier to be happy or sad. And I think you might be right. I think when I'm happy, I'm just afraid that it's going to turn to sadness pretty soon after, because I'm a worrier. I don't know if that's true of all people. I don't know if it's a Jewish thing. I don't know if it's an age thing. I can't remember if I was always this way. But I think it's a great conversation to have. David, can I put you on the spot and ask what you think? Trying to unmute you.
No, he says.
Okay, I will not put you on the spot. If anyone else wants to speak up, go ahead. And if not, I will go to the next activity, which I think is very nice also. Okay. So this is the Wild World Rap activity. And I was talking earlier to Deb, and I was telling her that it's not always easy to do the rap thing. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it, you definitely don't have to. I think this is an interesting poem just on its own. It's something that Matt Barr wrote. And you can either do it with your students or just read it and analyze it. What he has is the students perform a rap together. And you can add to this if you want to. The first thing he does is he puts in the background, you know how like you can rap over something. I see other people my age. So, you know, Baby It's a Wild World, that's Cat Stevens, right? He has a link to that so you can hear it. And you put that in the background while you rap over it. But when I was looking at it, one of the things is before we do any of this, we have to figure out what he's talking about and see how this relates to what we've been doing. So I'm going to read the words. And while I'm doing it, think about who is the speaker in this rap? Who are they addressing? And what is the point he's making? So I put a little picture in to give you a hint. But my smile is the sun and my eyes are a pair of nights. You live on my skin like a bunch of parasites. I'm the wide world and you have the rarest sight. Just enough intelligence to see what despair is like. Flatter yourself with original sin, but from me did you begin. You're my creation. I'm the wild world. We may cuddle in your youth. All the while I don't smile because I must to hide the truth. The wild world is red, claw, and tooth. So what can we take away from this? I think it's the world. I think that it's relating to, and this is my interpretation. Please jump in if you agree or disagree. But to me, it seems like we're talking about how we're first making a leap from Adam and Eve to how they have to work the world, and then to what we've done to the world. We just had Tu B'Shvat, you know, at the beginning of the week, and we are not stellar in our care for the world, and it may have a reference to that. I found that reference in it. And how does this relate to equanimity? Well, I think it's interesting because it's not talking about equanimity within ourselves. It's talking about equanimity within balancing what we do to the world. That's how I see it. Does anybody want to add anything to this? Okay. And let's go to the next one, which is about Cain and Abel. We can learn a few things about equanimity from Cain and Abel. So I've included 2 texts about them. Let's look at Genesis 4, 1 through 17 first. I'll read it to you, and while I'm reading it, think about the questions that are on the screen, okay? What makes Cain lose his equanimity and become so angry? What does God suggest for Cain to do when he gets angry? Why does Cain feel like he'll never have peace? Enoch means city builder. Why do you think Cain named him that when he was cursed to be a wanderer and never settled down? So let's read the text and think about these things while we read them. Now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gained a male child with the help of the Lord. She then bore his brother Abel. Abel became a keeper of sheep, and Cain became a tiller of the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought an offering to the Lord from the fruit of the soil, and Abel, for his part, brought the choicest of the firstlings of his flock. The Lord paid heed to Abel and his offering, but to Cain and his offering he paid no heed. Cain was much distressed, and his face fell. And the Lord said to Cain, Why are you distressed, and why is your face fallen? Surely if you do right, sin crouches at the door. Its urge is towards you, yet you can be its master. Okay, that's something to really think about. And when they were in the field, Cain set upon his brother Abel and killed him. The Lord said to Cain, Where is your brother Abel? And he said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? Then he said, What have you done? Hark, your brother's blood cries to me from the ground. Therefore you shall be more cursed than the ground which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. If you till the soil, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall become a ceaseless wanderer on earth. Cain said to the Lord, My punishment is too great to bear. Since you have banished me this day from the soil, I must avoid your presence and become a restless wanderer on earth. Anyone who meets me may kill me. The Lord said to him, I promise, if anyone kills Cain, 7-fold vengeance shall be taken on him. And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest anyone who met him should kill him. Cain left the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And then he founded a city and named the city after his son, Enoch. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff going on here. The first is that God is saying, keep your equanimity. You're going to be tempted to do something you're going to regret later. And we can see from this example, he certainly did. And bad stuff happened. So we know what makes Cain lose his equanimity. We know what God suggests. Why do you think Cain feels like he'll never have peace? And do you think he ever will have peace?
Well,
Is
how do we, yeah.
Oh, you just turned it off. I could hear you, and now I'm going to unmute you again. Okay, you were saying?
Okay, just that the never having peace is connected with that he feels that he's leaving God, that he'll be away from God.
Right.
That's not what God says, but that's what he thinks. So his perception of what's going to happen is different from God's.
And there are two really good things that come out of what you just said. One is that we sometimes don't see things the way they're meant. Like God or anyone could say something that would make us feel, we could misinterpret it and think we're abandoned or we don't have this person's support or God's support. And the other one is more general, and that's when you're thinking about equanimity and trying to keep your equanimity, don't jump to conclusions too fast. Don't let things take you on a ride. You know, I think most of the time when we get super stressed, we're a lot of steps ahead of ourselves. We're where we don't really need to be. And it's important to like pull back. This is a good example and say, you know what? Maybe it's not going to be as terrible as I think. No need to jump to conclusions until we know for sure. Now, the flip side of that is maybe having a plan B. Like if this terrible thing does happen, what am I going to do? And that's also a way to regain a little equanimity. But those are two things that I think are important in relation to the story. Is there anything anyone would like to add to that?
Just that the question before, the one about peace.
Yeah.
What does God suggest? God makes it very clear that the reaction that Cain has is his responsibility, and that he has a choice in that reaction. That he doesn't have to be angry. He doesn't have to feel that his face is fallen. The imagery of that beautiful saying, but that it's all in his hands, his reaction. That what happens around him is not in his control, but his reaction to it. And that's just such a forever lesson, every single day, and a forever lesson for all of humankind.
That's a really good point. That's a really, really good point. And I think that's something that really relates to what we're talking about, to equanimity. You're completely right. That's what we should do first. We should remind ourselves of this. So thanks. That's a really good point. Okay. Oh, wait. Yes, we're now going to look at Noah, and we're going to see some things we can learn from that. Oh, wait a minute. No. I'm sorry. There's more we can learn from Cain and Abel. There's a Midrash Tanhuma I'm going to read to you, and this is great because, again, we're looking at conflict between people, between nations, and within ourselves, and looking for parallels and the reasons for different kinds of conflict. So what Cain said to Abel was, "Come, let us divide the world between us." Abel replied, "Very well." So Cain said, "You take the flocks and I'll take the land." And it was agreed between them that the division was final, and neither could take what belonged to the other. Nevertheless, when Abel proceeded to graze the flock, Cain replied, "The land you're grazing on is mine." And Abel replied, "The wool you're wearing is mine." And Cain proceeded to chase Abel until the two grappled. So here we see a very clear conflict, and I think it even relates very much to things happening in our world today. So what would be, we could just do one reason for conflict between people. And I'm thinking of it more from an emotional standpoint than, this is my land and that's your animal. More like, I want to have control over you, or I want to have my way, or I don't want to feel that in any way my freedom is being, I have to share anything. Anybody else want to jump in there?
Well, there is something about just on the shot about possessiveness or ownership
Yeah.
that that we're mistaken about. We don't own the land. We don't own the wool of the sheep, and that, stepping back from that,
Yeah.
puts a different perspective on it.
Completely.
Which is a kind of control that it's certainly one of the forms of control, thinking that we own the land.
Completely true. And I think that some reasons for conflict are forgetting that. And certainly if you look at even Chaim materials, when we start talking about the environment, that's, that very classic story about two men are fighting over the land, and the rabbi puts his ear to the ground and says, oh, the ground says it doesn't belong to either of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's completely right. Yeah, they're talking about I control this and you control that. But in reality, you're right. Nobody controls that stuff. And I think if we want to look at that we're looking at it between people, but that's also true between nations. And now if we look at it within ourselves, that source of conflict might be different. I would like to think that although we don't have control from the outside in, we have control from the inside out. We can decide, as Cain should have, how to react. We can try to keep our equanimity. And I think there's a case to be made here for seeing these as opposites, and having equanimity from within ourselves when things from the outside make us feel a little bit stressed. Anybody want to jump in here? Okay, so that's important. And I think it's the first time in these texts that we're being able to relate it to ourselves in a way of the outside world and the inside world, and what we have control of and what we don't have control of. So I think that's important. Now I'm thinking about another situation on board with Noah. So before I read the text, I thought I'd share a little background about this short text. It's written by Rabbi Dr. Norman Solomon, and I didn't know much about him, so I thought it might be the same with you guys. So he is still alive. He's from England. He was the director of the Center for the Study of Judaism and Jewish-Christian Relations. So he is a person who does a lot of interfaith stuff, or as we say now, multi-faith. He's written 5 books and over 70 articles on a wide range of issues in the fields of Jewish studies and Jewish-Christian relationships. He's edited a number of volumes in these fields, and his major works include books on Judaism and world religion, the analytic movement, Chaim Soloveitchik and his school, the Talmud, a selection, and Torah from heaven. So when we read this, you can kind of keep that in mind. Oh, okay. Okay. So he says, when I read Parshat Noach, I see not just words from the sky, but a distillation of millennia of human experience, of traumatic events that have forged us into what we are and have become etched into human consciousness. So what I think he's talking about, 2 things came to my mind. First, that many cultures have a flood story. He might be referring to this especially because he's got that multi-faith background. And then I also think that if you look at it another way, living on board the ark with all kinds of animals that need to be fed and cared for, and having a limited number of people with whom to share this responsibility, not to mention a limited number of people to hang out with, and in a limited space, which is why I chose this illustration, because it doesn't look too comfortable. So I think that can be a real test of equanimity. And it's kind of a good segue to the next text, which approaches equanimity more from a more equanimity and less the Noah story. So I'll go and I'll read that, and then you can discuss it a little bit. So I put in green the words that would make me lose my equanimity. But we should also remember that there's a huge change going on outside of the ark. And no one on board this ark is going to be the same once the flood is over, and they might be aware of it. So now we'll read it. We'll look at the green words and then we'll talk about it a little bit. And the Lord shut him in. The flood continued 40 days on the earth, and the waters increased and raised the ark so that it rose above the earth. The waters swelled and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark drifted upon the waters. When the waters had swelled much more upon the earth, all the highest mountains everywhere under the sky were covered. 15 cubits higher did the waters swell, as the mountains were covered. And all flesh that stirred on earth perished, birds, cattle, beasts, and all the things that swarmed upon the earth, and all mankind. All in whose nostrils was the merest breath of life, all that was on dry land died. All existence on earth was blotted out, man, cattle, creeping things, and birds of the sky. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. Okay, so let's think about this. Which things would stress you out if you were on the ark with Noah? So I think being in a limited place with so many animals, and they might have known or might not have known. I don't know whether they believed it was going to be 40 days. And I'm doing this, I mean, I know there's a lot of theories. You may or may not see it as an actual, but I think it's a good thing to do, to think of it in those terms, just because it's interesting to think about the stress. So that's what would stress me out, would be like just taking care of all those animals. Anybody want to jump in there? I greened out the 40 days, the swells, but that could be a source also. What were you going to say? Okay. So I don't know whether you know this. I actually live on a sailboat, and the swelling of the water does not bother me, but it bothers people who are on my boat sometimes. So I think that could bother people. I think, again, just being in an enclosed space with just your family for that time could be stressful. And then a more complicated question. Once Noah and his family and all the animals disembarked, and the word ark is in disembarked, how did they adjust to their new lives? Or to relate it to us and to the students, how does one regain equanimity after experiencing traumatic events? And I think that's a good discussion to have. How do you regain your equanimity? What things help you to recover after a stressful experience? Does anyone want to say what would help them recover? Yeah.
I remember I was in New York City, actually. I was studying at JTS on September 11th. And probably for 3 or 4 months after that, my son didn't leave the house without kissing me goodbye. It was a really nice time. And every chance we got, we were with our family. We got together every night, even if it meant missing, not studying, not doing it. Everything was sort of put aside to spend time with our family. And it was a compulsion. You couldn't, so it was almost like we weren't planning that at all. It just, we couldn't stay away from one another. That was very comforting, very helpful.
You know, it's very interesting because what you're showing is that the traumatic experience helped you reevaluate your priorities.
I mean, it forced me to. I wasn't that I said, okay, I'm gonna be with my family more now. I'll appreciate my family. There was this thing inside of me, a human need.
Right.
To pull in, to draw in the people who were really important.
Right. So I think that's, if we want to extrapolate from that for, more general, it's important to think about your priorities. And it's interesting because the topic for the standard topics is mindfulness and conscious living. And both in that topic and equanimity, we talk about Shabbat and we talk about prayer as things that can help us think about our priorities. And when you can be more objective and you can prioritize what's important, I think you can be more balanced. So I think that what you're saying is very important, and it's showing, one way, an actual, way that this could happen. But I think generally it's something we should think about because I think it's important. Right, and then a nice thing after this for the students, and again, you don't have to rap, although you can, just talk about the benefits of having equanimity. So every lesson has creative time, and save this work where they do this so that we can put it in the, if you're doing it, if you want to do an end video, you'll send photos of, you know, their illustrations. If you video them on your cell phone, send that to Matt, and he'll put it all together and make it into a nice video. So it's a good place for the kids to share their thoughts about this and what they've kind of thought so far about it. Okay. Another nice thing that happens next is wrapping Rebbe. You might remember this feature is in every lesson also. And again, if the kids want to, they can reach Wrapping Rebbe's on Instagram, ask a question, share something they've done, and they'll get a response within 48 hours. There are 3 of them. There's Ephraim, I like that one. There's Papa Left, and there's Matt, and one of them will answer. So that's a nice thing. And then I also love this one, the Beat Midrash, and we call this Getting to Your Happy Place. So in each Beat Midrash section, one of the Wrapping Rebbes analyzes the traditional texts and then provides a wrap on the topic. And again, even if you're not so comfortable actually rapping, you can just put this video on and the kids can see it and they can react to it in their own way. I think it kind of makes the biblical and historical texts relevant because it brings it into a little bit more of this world. So here he points out, he's talking about being in the industry, being a rapper, and not responding to the things on the internet. You know, people talk about him, how when you become successful, people also try to take you down a notch or two. And he points out that equanimity is something we can work on. Some people exercise it in order to attain equanimity for the day, like they'll meditate, or they'll you know, they'll pray, or they'll think, or whatever it takes. Maybe they'll do some yoga. Life is stressful. It's important that we deal with that stress in a healthy way and not add to it needlessly. So I'm going to read it, and we can think about it, and then we can talk about it. I take the good with the bad, but the bad will never finish me, because in this industry, the evils will tell you to come closer. But my heart is with the people. I'm keeping my composure. I know there's trolls on the internet that jump on a text, but you got to stay focused. Don't act dumb. Get a tech. That's points for the other team. Let it be. Man, that's your energy. Keep your equanimity. I know that he does it a lot better than I do. But I think the point that's nice is that in a relevant and you know, current way, he's reminding people that one of the points that we made in our biblical text as well, the control is inside of us. The equanimity is inside of us, and that's something we need to keep in mind. Another really nice feature of this is that students can draw Lefty's happy place, whatever they picture it as being, and tag it, hashtag Chai Mitzvah, and we'll take the winning drawing and make it the backdrop of the next Beat Midrash. So I'll add this to the follow-up email, and if any of your students want to do that, you know, it'll be very exciting to have that as part of it. And now a completely different look about being in a happy place, and one that certainly is interesting. The next text is from Anne Frank. She searched for equanimity in the midst of hiding from the Nazis, and she thought that she would be able to find this balance and this better feeling outside. She wrote, "The best remedy for those who are afraid, lonely, or unhappy is to go outside, somewhere where they can be quiet, alone with the heavens, nature, and God, because only then does one feel that all is as it should be." So we can even take this to a personal level. Where do you find your solace? Where do you go to reflect? And do you prefer to be alone or with someone? Anybody like to share where they like to go or what they like to do? Let me tell you, so I had a webinar for adults yesterday. We were talking about how to find equanimity. And one of the people said that she finds that it helps her to have a friend who's kind of on an even keel. So it's not just, some people, I guess, want to be alone or want to be with nature like Anne Frank. Some people want to be with someone who helps them and reminds them and has experiences that maybe they haven't had, so that people can help each other as well. And I thought that made a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's the issue with Anne Frank and the difference between the kids today going out into the forest and so forth was really something that these kids did. And I was just with my grandchildren last weekend, and their father was standing over them. You've only been outside 5 minutes. Go back out. And it's very difficult. The idea of being outside is not it's not as fun as being inside and with a video game. And so it seems like a punishment rather than and I don't know what to do about that. I'm very sad about it, but
It's an interesting point. Another interesting point is how they're so unusual for kids here in our communities to not be always watched over.
Mm-hmm.
Like, very unusual for them to just go outside the way, our parents sent us outside, and they just had us come back at dinner time.
Right.
Whatever happened in between, like, we learned how to deal with it, which is, I think, why we have so many snowflakes, as they're called now. They're used to being constantly monitored. So that's another thing that we might think about. I wonder if we asked our students, do you wish you were able to just go outside? What would they say? There must be students who want to go in nature, I imagine. There are people who like to hike. Or maybe not. Maybe they want to be alone with their headphones. I don't know. But I'd love to find out what people do want to do, what people of that generation want to do to gain their equanimity, and whether they need to be alone or with people, and whether it should be in nature or in a movie theater or, in their room or whatever. It's just an interesting thought. So maybe next webinar we'll ask what people found out about this, kind of answers they got. So kind of this brings us to Shabbat, which is a way that some people gain equanimity. During Shabbat, we become one with nature. Many Hasidic masters found their equanimity by communing with nature. And here's a rap which speaks on this relationship. And also the standard topic for February, mindfulness and conscious living, comes in here too, because during Shabbat, you can focus on, because you're maybe turning your cell phone off, maybe for an hour if you can't really do it. You at least should take some time to focus on what's important to you. So Matt wrote, as I open up my eyes to the leaves on the trees, in my ear I hear a sound like a sweet melody. The crickets play violin, the frogs drop a beat, pebbles start to rock to God's symphony. Every bit of life is singing a song. By the end of Shabbat, I'll be singing along. I'll just buzz like a bee, buzz into the beat, and I'd love to hear you buzz just once with me. Let's pray together, 10 members for forever. Really nice. So we can discuss this. Chaim Nachman Bialik said, the Sabbath is a day of rest, of mental scrutiny, and of balance. Without it, the workdays are insipid. So how would Shabbat help you to gain equanimity? This is an easy question. So it's a time to, I think, get some perspective on your life. That's one of the things that I think helps you gain equanimity, is the perspective, and a time to spend with people that really care about you. So I think those things together are perhaps what helps us to gain our equanimity on Shabbat. Does anybody want to add anything? Okay, then this is a complicated song, the Fourfold Song. When I read it myself and thought about it, I kind of put in italics what made sense to me. I'm going to give a little introduction to it because I think, especially hearing it and not seeing it, it's going to be important. It's about looking at the world through as if you're four different people. Okay, and I'll as I go through, if you have questions, please just interrupt me, okay? There's one who sings the song of his own life, and in himself he finds everything, his full spiritual satisfaction. There's another who sings the song of his people. He leaves the circle of his own individual self because he finds it without sufficient breadth, without idealistic basis. He aspires towards the heights, and he attaches himself with a gentle love to the whole community of Israel. Together with her, he sings her songs. He feels grieved in her afflictions and delights in her hopes. He contemplates noble and pure thoughts about her past and her future, and probes with love and wisdom her inner spiritual essence. So far we've got one person who finds it in himself, his or herself, one person who finds it in Israel. There's another who reaches more distant realms, and he goes beyond the boundary of Israel to sing the song of all human beings. His spirit extends to the wider vistas of the majesty of man, generally, and his noble essence. He aspires towards man's general goal and looks forward towards his higher perfection. From this source of life, he draws the subject of his meditation and study, his aspirations and visions. So the third person is going beyond Israel to all of humanity. Here's a fourth one. There is one who rises toward wider horizons until he links himself with all existence, with all God's creatures, with all worlds, and sings his song with them. It is one such as this, the tradition has said, whoever sings a portion of song each day is assured of having a share in the world to come. So that's the person who's going to the whole earth, to every living creature to find this peace. And then there's one who rises with all these songs in one ensemble, and they all join their voices. Together they sing their songs with beauty. Each one lends vitality and life to the other. They are sounds of joy and gladness, sounds of jubilation and celebration, sounds of ecstasy and holiness. The song of the self, the song of the people, the song of man, or I would say humanity, the song of the world, all merge in this person at all times and every hour. And this full comprehensiveness rises to become the song of holiness, the song of God, the song of Israel, and its full strength and beauty, its full authenticity and greatness. The name Israel stands for Shir El, the song of God. It's a simple song, a twofold song, a threefold song, and a fourfold song. The Song of Songs of Solomon, which Shlomo, which means peace or wholeness, is the song of King, in whom is wholeness. Okay, it's a long one, but I think if we think about it as the four different aspects, we should be able to answer this question. Which of these four songs do you most relate to? Or let's even say five, because there's also the one who puts them all together. I can see myself being one of these four all the time. And within one day, having all of the different ones, all the different aspects. And I think we can even think of actual situations where this happens. When would be a time when someone is seeing the world with the perspective of the fourth one, of the one who sees all living things? When is a time when you might see things just through yourself? I'm thinking for regaining equanimity, you can be stressed by something if you're just seeing it through your own lens. And you can be more calm as you reach out to your people, to all people, and to all of the earth. Anybody want to talk about this? It is complicated. But I think it's...
I'm just trying to think of people who I think are examples of these, to see how they managed.
Yeah.
And you know, people like Martin Luther King, we just celebrated, or Gandhi, that started out as maybe number two, working for their people, but certainly then moved beyond that realm. And especially in their memories, they've moved beyond that realm to the whole earth and to putting it all together.
That is so interesting. And what a good angle on this. I didn't think of that. And what a good way to teach it to the students as well, to look at it through people who they're familiar with, who've done amazing things in the world, and to see how these different ways of looking at the world have helped them get to where they are and have helped other people to relate to what happened. That's excellent. I'm putting that in our highlight.
Yeah, that first one, the personal one, it might seem like it's sort of diminished, but I can think like my mother, who nobody knows who she was, but the, you know, the, what she did with her own self and her own, you know, it made a difference in her world, and then there were rippling effects.
That's true. And a lot of times, because things are so frustrating now politically and in the world in general, a lot of times I'll say to my kids, well, you know, I can't do anything about certain things, but I can influence the people I talk to every day or the people I impact. And it's very good to think of it, that there can be a ripple. There is a ripple in certain ways. You know, paying it forward and just making things good where you can. So that example of your mother is really good. Thanks. All right, well, that was the height of our thoughts. Next comes another creative time where students just pick something that they've learned, or one of the topics that they studied, you know, one of the texts, and write about it in rap form or illustrate it in a few words by making, you know, words. Ad lib, you know, make up something that they want to maybe record, meditate on it, and share their thoughts out loud or in a journal. And one thing is good, just try students have a different creative activity each time so they can kind of experience all the different aspects of it. So that's an easy one. And then I have some links to additional information which are really good and relevant, and I think kids will like them. There's an article about Serena Williams and how composure helps her to win her games. She actually did a really nice thing recently. She played someone, a much younger player, who tried so hard and lost, and kind of, when she lost, she just fell apart. And Serena actually very nicely comforted her and put her in perspective and helped her realize that, you know, she is a great competitor. She wasn't just trying to play a good game, she was trying to win. And it was very nice the way, as an older player, she put it in perspective. There's an article about Beyonce keeping up her composure. There's what I love, Another Vision of Eden, the song Atlantis by Donovan. The Jewish Yoga Network is awesome. It's a community of teachers and students who explore their roots in yoga, meditation, and Jewish wisdom. And all of these are linked in the PDF that you have, so you can just click on them. There's Jewish mindfulness meditation, and there's Jewish meditation. There's an article, How Sitting Helped One Brooklynite Connect with Judaism. It's a nice article. I think it might be in the foreword. I forget, but you just click on the link and you'll find it. And then for social action, there's some suggestions where kids can think of what they want to do. But there's one, you know, advocate for peace, and they can click at doinggoodtogether.org. And then I really like this one. There's something, it's a small, simple thing you can do, remind people of peace, distribute peace buttons. You can get them for very, very little money, or maybe free, from this website, and then just give them out to people and remind them how inner peace and peace in the world are important. Any more comments or thoughts?
Nina, did you say you were gonna go through standard material or not?
I'm not going to go through it except for how it relates to this, because if you go to our website, there is an earlier webinar going through it with teachers not recently, like last year. So because of that, and because we don't have any webinars on the Matt Barr stuff, I kind of go from him and relate it to what we're doing. And then if you want really specifically focus on each of those texts, it's already online. Just go to chaimitzvah.org, teen webinars, and you'll find it listed there.
The last year's, okay.
Last year's Musar and the year before is standard, and they're both already on there.
Okay.
But I like to have everyone on the webinars as well, because it's just interesting to get your insights and to the topics relate to each other, and, you know, I like to keep in touch. So I hope that it's useful to be on this webinar, even if you're not doing the Matt Barr curriculum.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you. Yeah. I heard something. All right. Whoever is making a little bit of a noise, I'm not hearing you. So if you have any other thing that you need to say or ask, you can always email me. I'm going to send a follow-up email. And I want to thank everyone for being part of the webinar and for your thoughts and comments. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.